Hello everyone, welcome to my class, Financial Markets. I'm Professor Zhong. In today's class, we are going to go through Forex market or FX market. Full name, we can call Forex exchange markets. So in today's chapter, we are going to talk about Forex exchange rates and the Forex market. Let's quickly preview what we are going to go through the contents. In the first, I will give you definitions of exchange rates. After that, we will talk about what are depreciation or appreciation in the Forex market. And then I will introduce the Forex markets. Finally, we will talk about how to determine equilibrium exchange rate in the Forex market. We will cover determination of exchange rates. Firstly, here, let's define what are exchange rates. As we know, exchange rate play a very important role for two different currencies. In the world, different countries use different currencies. As we know, in Taiwan, because we stay in Taiwan, we live in Taiwan, we use NT dollar or New Taiwan dollar as our currency, right? We call domestic currency. But in the US, the people live in the US, they use the US dollar. So different countries will use different currencies. So how to measure the price of the product or service in a common currency is very important. So that we have to learn the tool we call the exchange rates. Exchange rates are quoted as a domestic currency per unit of foreign currency or foreign currency per unit of domestic currency. For example, if you want to exchange NT dollar or Taiwan dollar to US dollar, we want to know the exchange rate between two different currencies, right? So we can ask people or we can look up the exchange rate. We want to measure how much can be exchanged for $1 US. If today's exchange rate equals 32, 32 means we can exchange 32 NT dollar for $1 US, right? Or in other words, you can say $1 US can buy 32 NT dollars. On the other way, to illustrate exchange rate, you can say how much can be exchanged for 1 NT dollar. Okay, so if you want to exchange for 1 NT dollar, how much US dollar can be exchanged? So if today's exchange rate equals 0.03125, okay, that means 1 NT dollar can buy 0.03125 US dollars or 0.03215 US dollars can be exchanged for 1 NT dollar. That means we have two ways to illustrate exchange rates. So in this example, as you can see, we can consider a currency, maybe it's domestic currency. We consider domestic currency is a base currency. And we can measure the price of domestic currency in terms of foreign currency, right? So we have the first way, exchange rate, to illustrate the point, right? For example, domestic currency in Taiwan, as we know, is NT dollar, right? If we want to measure the price of NT dollar in terms of US dollars, if the current exchange rate equals 0.03125, that means 1 NT dollar buys 0.03125 US dollars, right? So that means if you want to illustrate the exchange rate, you can consider domestic currency as a base currency. And the other currency, I mean foreign currency, will play the role of quote currency. Quote currency play the role means he can measure the price of the base currency. On the other hand, or if the current exchange rate equals 32, 32 means if you want to buy one foreign currency, we have to spend 32 domestic currencies, right? So the current exchange rate equal 32 means in this way to illustrate exchange rate, that means we consider foreign currency as a base currency. And on the other hand, the domestic currency play the role of the core currency. So that if you want to buy or measure the price of foreign currency per unit of foreign currency, we can use the domestic currency to measure the price of the per foreign currency, right? So the exchange rate equal 32 means we measure the price of the per unit of foreign currency in terms of domestic currency. So from this example, we will realize we have two ways to illustrate the exchange rate. And the main function of the exchange rate allows us to denominate the cost of the price or the price of a good or service in a common currency. If you want to make comparison, the notebook we can sell maybe Asus notebook we sell to the Americans, also sell to the Taiwanese. The same for the same Asus notebook, we will have two different prices in two countries, right? If you want to buy Asus notebook in the US, maybe you have to spend 1,000 US dollars. But in Taiwan, if you want to buy the same Asus notebook, you have to spend maybe 30,000 NT dollars, right? So we want to figure out the Asus notebook for the same Asus notebook, which country you will afford the high price, or you can buy the Asus notebook cheaper. How to make comparison? So here we need exchange rate to help us to illustrate the price. We can measure the price in a common currency. It's very important. For example, if the today's exchange rate equal 30, 30 means 1 US dollar can buy 30 NT dollars. So in this case, the Asus notebook sell the notebook in the US, the price is 1,000, right? 1,000 US dollars. At the same time, the Asus notebook sell in Taiwan, we have to spend 30,000 Taiwan dollars, right? That means if the current exchange rate equal 30, that means the same Asus notebook will sell the same price in two countries, right? So the exchange rate allows us to denominate the cost of the price of good or service in a common currency. So here I also give an example to illustrate my point. In this example, we consider we want to buy a SUV, a car SUV, right? We have two brands. The first brand is Ford SUV. As we know, the Ford SUV, the Ford brand belongs to the US, right? The other brand is Luxgen SUV. Luxgen SUV is a local brand in Taiwan, right? So if we want to figure out the price of Ford SUV, if the Ford SUV costs 30,000 US dollars in the US, okay? Now the company, Ford company, they want to export the Ford SUV to Taiwan and sell to Taiwanese. So how much we have to pay to buy the Ford SUV, right? So here we have to use the exchange rate to help us to denominate the price of a car, I mean the SUV, in terms of Taiwan dollar, right? If the today's exchange rate equals 32, we can use 30,000 US dollars times 32. That means we can measure the price of a Ford SUV in terms of NT dollars, right? So the Ford SUV should sell the price at the 960,000 NT dollars, right? On the other hand, in Taiwan, we can buy Luxgen SUV, right? Initially, the luxury SUV cost us 640,000 NT dollars. But now, the Americans also want to buy luxury SUV from Taiwan. So how much they have to pay? Okay, by using the exchange rate, we can quickly calculate the price of a luxury SUV in the US, right? So how can we do that? As we know, the current exchange rate equals 32. Or the other way to illustrate exchange rate is 1 NT dollar can buy 0.033125 US dollars, right? So by using exchange rate, we can exchange or transfer the price of luxury SUV in terms of US dollars. So if the Americans want to buy the luxury SUV, they have to spend 20,000 US dollars. Okay, so from this example, we can understand the exchange rate can help us to denominate the cost or price of a good or service in a common currency. That's why we can make comparison the price in two countries or at different countries. Now, according to previous examples, here I want to illustrate how to express exchange rate. Actually, we have two ways to illustrate exchange rates. The first way we call indirect quotation. In other words, we can call quantity quotation or European terms. In this way to illustrate exchange rate, for example, here I would like to consider two different majors or major currencies. The major currencies are Euro and the US dollar. As we know, in Eurozone countries, this country, people live in this country, they use Euro, right? But in the US, Americans, they will use the US dollar, right? So here we consider two majors or major currencies in the world, okay? So here, pretend we are Americans, okay? And the domestic country is US, and the foreign country is Eurozone countries. Now, we want to measure the price of the exchange rate, okay? We want to illustrate the exchange rate between US dollar and the Euro, okay? So we want to illustrate the exchange rate between US dollar and the Euro. In the first way, I want to figure out how many euros equals $1, right? So in direct quotation, we will consider the US dollar is a base currency, okay? And the Euro will play the role of the core currency. The core currency can help us to measure the price of per unit of domestic currency. Okay, so in this example, how many euros equals $1? As we know, in this example, US dollar is a base currency. Euro is a core currency, right? We want to measure. If we want to buy $1 US, how much we have to pay in terms of euros, okay? If today's exchange rate equals 0.83215, that means $1 US buys 0.83215 euros. Yeah. In other words, you can say, if you want to buy $1 US, or you want to exchange for $1 US, you have to spend 0.83215 euros. Okay, so it's the first way to illustrate exchange rate. The second way to illustrate exchange rate we call direct quotation, so-called price quotation or American terms. In this way, to illustrate exchange rate, we have to consider, or we also consider two majors, right? Euros and the Euro and the US dollar. But in this way, to illustrate exchange rate, we have to figure out how many euros equals 1 euro, how many dollars equals 1 euro. So in this example, we will consider Euro is a base currency. On the other hand, US dollar plays the role of the core currency. If we want to measure the price of per euro in terms of US dollars, we will use the way to illustrate exchange rate we call direct quotation. Okay, so if today's exchange rate equals 1.2017, that means if we want to buy 1 euro, we have to spend 1.2017 US dollars to buy 1 euro. Or if you want to exchange 1 euro, we have to spend 1.2017 to exchange for 1 euro. Okay, so in this way, to illustrate rate, we will consider US dollar, the domestic currency, is the core currency. On the other hand, the foreign currency, euro, plays the role of the base currency. And in this session, I would like to introduce the two phenomena in the forex market. The two phenomena are very important. Sometimes we will, if we monitor the exchange rate behavior, sometimes exchange rate will go up or go down. What does that mean? That means the interchange between two different currencies, they always fluctuate, right? Fluctuates a lot. So sometimes exchange rate goes up, sometimes exchange rate goes down. What does that mean? Here I will use the two phenomena to illustrate the point. Okay, the first one I would like to describe the first phenomena we call depreciation. What is the depreciation? Okay, in this session we have to focus on the domestic currency. When we mention the domestic currency faces depreciation or domestic currency depreciate, what does that mean? That means the domestic currency is less variable. Okay, so when we exchange the domestic currency for the foreign currency, we will exchange less foreign currency than before. Okay, so here let's define what is depreciation. Okay, as the subtitle of the PowerPoint slides, as you can see, depreciation is a decrease in the value of a currency relative to another currency. So that a depreciated currency is less variable, as I mentioned before, right? And we have to focus on the domestic currency, right? When we mention domestic currency faces depreciation or domestic currency depreciate, means relative to the foreign currency, the value of domestic currency will be less variable or less expensive, and therefore can be exchanged for a smaller amount of foreign currency. Okay, for example, initially the current exchange rate equals 1. 1 means 1 euro for 1 US dollar. In this example, we will use the direct quotation form to illustrate the example. Okay, in the direct quotation, let me remind you. In the direct quotation means we consider the foreign currency, I mean euro, as a base currency, and the domestic currency, I mean US dollar, will play the role of core currency, right? So initially the current exchange rate equals 1 euro for 1 dollar, and after that the exchange rate goes up from 1 to 1.2. What does that mean? Initially 1 euro for 1 dollar, but after exchange rate goes up, 1 euro for 1.2 US dollars. That means euro. In this example, euro appreciate. At the same time, US dollar depreciate. Why? Because initially 1 euro can exchange for 1 US dollar, right? But after exchange rate goes up, 1 euro can exchange more US dollars, right? 1 euro can exchange for $1.20, right? So that in this example, we can say US dollar faces depreciation. At the same time, euro faces appreciation because after exchange rate goes up, it now takes 1.2 US dollars to buy 1 euro, so that the dollar is less expensive or less variable. On the other hand, you can say the euro has appreciated relative to the dollar. It's now much variable. Compared to the depreciation, here we have appreciation. Appreciation is object to the depreciation. Okay, appreciation is an increase in the value of a currency relative to another currency. When we mention the domestic currency faces appreciation, or the domestic currency appreciated relative to another currency, that means the domestic currency will become more variable relative to before. Okay, so an appreciated currency is more variable or more expensive, and therefore can be exchanged for a larger amount of foreign currency. I give example to illustrate the point. Initially, exchange rate equals 1 euro for $1, and after that, when the exchange rate goes down from 1 to 0.9, in this example, we can say the dollar has appreciated relative to euro. Okay, so in this example, as you can see, initially, if you want to buy 1 euro, we have to spend 1 US dollar, right? But after exchange rate falls down, right, from 1 to 0.9, if you want to buy the same 1 euro, we only have to spend 90 cents. Okay, that means the dollar is more variable. On the other hand, you can say the euro is less variable. So in this example, we can say as exchange rate fall down, the dollar faces appreciation. At the same time, the euro faces depreciation because the euro has depreciated relative to the dollar. Is now less variable. After we discuss the depreciation and the appreciation, here in this session, I want to focus on the international trade. Actually, for importers and the exporters, they always care about exchange rate. Why? Because when exchange rate goes up or goes down, that will affect the price of exports or price of imports. It's very important for their profit. Okay. For example, here I give an example to illustrate my point. If in this example we assume domestic currency faces depreciation. As I mentioned before, a depreciated currency is less variable and therefore can buy fewer foreign product goods that are denominated in foreign currency. What happened to the price of exports, the price of imports? Let me use an example to illustrate my point. Okay, let's recall the previous example. I mentioned the SUV cases, right? We have the Ford SUV. Also, we have the local brand Lexus SUV. Initially, the Ford SUV cost Americans $30,000 US dollars. Okay, by using the current exchange rate, if the current exchange equals 32, 32 means 1 US dollar can buy 32 Taiwan dollars, right? So we use the exchange rate can help us to exchange, to transfer the price of the Ford SUV into Taiwan dollars, right? So Taiwanese want to buy the Ford SUV. The current exchange rate equals 32. They have to spend 960,000 NT dollars, right? Because by using the current exchange rate, the current exchange rate can help us to denominate the price of the Ford SUV in terms of Taiwan dollars in this case, right? But now, when exchange rate goes up from 32 to 33. So as you can see, we have a new exchange rate, right? The new exchange rate is higher than the past exchange rate. So in this case, we call US dollar will be more variable. At the same time, Taiwan dollar will be less variable, right? So in this case, we call Taiwan dollar faces depreciation. At the same time, the US dollar faces depreciation, right? So we want to figure out what happened to the price of imports in this case. Okay, if Taiwanese want to buy the Ford SUV, they have to make payment in terms of Taiwan dollar. How much they have to pay in this case? As exchange rate go up from 32 to 33, as you can see, if you want to buy the same Ford SUV, they have to spend 990,000 NT dollars. Okay, what does that mean? Actually, in this case, the price of Ford SUV in terms of US dollars is the same, 30,000 US dollars. But when after exchange rate go up, Taiwanese have to spend more money, more Taiwan dollars to buy the same Ford SUV. Okay, that means for exporters, for exports, as exchange rate goes up, domestic currency faces depreciation. It will increase the price of imports, right? The price of imports is unfavorable for imports. Now, let's discuss how about exports in this example. Let's consider the previous example I mentioned before, the luxury SUV. Initially, the current exchange rate equals 32, right? The luxury SUV cost the Taiwanese 640,000 NT dollars. So at the current exchange rate, 32, the exchange rate can help us to exchange the Taiwan dollars to US dollars. So Americans want to buy the same, the luxury SUV. How much they have to pay? So in this example, as you can see, 640,000 Taiwan dollars equals 20,000 US dollars, right? That means Americans want to buy the luxury SUV, they have to spend 20,000 US dollars. But after exchange rate go up from 32 to 33, how much they have to pay? So as you can see, the same amount of the money in terms of Taiwan dollars, I mean 640,000 NT dollars. After exchange rate go up, we can transfer this amount of money into US dollars. So as you can see, 640,000 NT dollars equals 19,394 US dollars. What does that mean? That means as exchange rate go up, Taiwan dollar faces depreciation. At the same time, US dollar faces appreciation. That will lower the price of exports, right? Exports for Americans, right? So Americans will buy cheaper luxury SUV than before after Taiwan dollar depreciate or US dollar appreciate. Okay, so here we can make conclusion. A depreciated currency means the imports are more expensive, and the domestically produced goods and the exports are less expensive. Thus, it's favorable to exports, is unfavorable to imports. So this example is very important. It's very helpful for you to understand, to realize if the exchange rate go up, domestic currencies faces depreciation, foreign currency faces appreciation. What happened to the price of exports and the price of imports? How to affect the international trade is very important. So here, let me summarize the example. From this example, we realize when domestic currency faces depreciation, it's unfavorable to imports. Why? Because the price of imports will get higher than before, right? And for domestic countries people, they will afford the higher cost of the imports, right? On the other hand, it's favorable to exports. After the domestic currency faces depreciation, it's favorable to exporters. Why? Because the price of exports were less expensive than before, right? And is helpful for the importers will export more goods and services to other countries, right? And people living in the foreign countries will buy more products or goods or services from domestic countries, right? So it's favorable to exporters. It's unfavorable to importers. On the other hand, if domestic currency faces appreciation, what happened to the imports and the exports? We can focus on the price of imports and the price of exports. It's up the case to previous slides, right? So let's quickly read the case, okay? If the domestic currency faces appreciation, as we know, appreciated currency is more valuable, and therefore it can buy more foreign produced goods and that are denominated in foreign currency. Let's consider another example, okay? Almost the similar example. Initially, if the Ford SUV costs $30,000 US, okay? At the current exchange rate, the current exchange, if current exchange is 32, so $30,000 US can be exchanged for 960,000 NT dollars. Okay. After exchange rate falls down, fall down means $1 will buy less NT dollars or Taiwan dollars. That means in this case, US dollar faces depreciation, Taiwan dollar faces appreciation. Here we want to figure out what happened to the price of imports. Okay, so as you can see, if the at the new exchange rate, the current exchange rate equals 30. Okay, Taiwan dollar faces appreciation. Okay, what happened to the price of imports in this case? So as you can see, the same for the SUV, the price is $30,000 US. $30,000 US can exchange for 900,000 NT dollars. What does that mean? After Taiwan dollar appreciate, so as you can see, the same for the SUV will cost less money or cost less NT dollars, right? So for Taiwanese, if they found after the current exchange rate falls down from 32 to 30, they will find out the price of imports will decrease. They can buy the same Ford SUV at a cheaper price. Okay, so here we can make conclusion. After the current exchange rate fall down, domestic currency faces appreciation. Is favorable to imports. Why? Because for local people, all the citizens in this country, they will buy the imports or buy at the cheap price, right? Or less, or the imports will become less expensive than before. Okay. On the other hand, how about the exports? Okay. Let's consider the luxury SUV case. Initially, the luxury SUV cost $640,000 NT dollars. Okay, at the current exchange rate 32, if Americans want to buy the luxury SUV, they have to spend $20,000 US dollars. After exchange rate fall down from 32 to 30, I mean US dollar depreciates. At the same time, Taiwan dollar appreciate. What happened to the price of exports for the Americans? So as you can see, the same amount of money in terms of NT dollars I mean 640,000 NT dollars can be exchanged for 21,333 US dollars. So in this case, you will realize after the current exchange rate fall down, domestic currency faces appreciation. That will increase the price of exports, right? And reduce the value of exports. So here we can make conclusion. An appreciated currency means the imports are less expensive, and the domestically produced goods and the exports are more expensive. Thus, it's favorable to imports, but it's unfavorable to exports. That means an appreciated currency rises the price of exports relative to the price of imports. So from this example, we can make a conclusion. When the domestic currency faces appreciation, that will lower the price of exports, right? And sorry, let me refresh that. That will rise the price of exports and lower the price of imports. Okay, so that when we mention domestic currencies faces appreciation, is favorable to imports, is unfavorable to exports. Okay. Now in this section, I want to introduce the forex markets. So here I give you a clear definition about the forex markets. Okay, as we know, the forex markets is a set of the markets where foreign currencies and the other assets are exchanged for domestic ones. So people or investors or even financial institutions, they will engage in the currency exchange in the forex market. Okay, so institutions will buy or sell deposits of currencies or other assets for their investment purposes. Or here I also give you another definition about the forex market. Forex market, you can define the market in which the currency of the country, one country is exchanged for the currency of another. Okay, so the forex market that is made up of importers, as I mentioned before, or exporters, and the commercial banks and the special dealers who buys or sell currencies in the market. Now, let's discuss who will join or participate in these markets. So here, I want to explain the participants in the forex market. Who are the participants? The first one is the commercial banks and the other depository institutions. For commercial banks or depository institutions, they will make transaction. The transaction will involve buying or selling the deposits in different currencies for investment purposes. Okay, for example, the commercial banks will offer the service. You can help you, traders or people. They can buy or sell different currencies, right, for their purposes. And the second one is non-bank financial institutions, such as mutual funds, hedge funds, security firms, insurance companies, and the pension fund. The non-bank financial institutions, they will buy or sell foreign assets for their investments. And the third one, non-financial business conduct the foreign currency transactions, such as multinational corporations or transitional corporations. They will set up their branches in the world, in other countries, right? They have to make payment of the salary for the foreign workers, or they have to receive the payment or revenue from other country in terms of the foreign currency, right? They have the purposes to sell or receive the payment from other countries. So they will conduct the foreign currency transactions for their purposes. And the last one, as we know, the central banks, right? The central bank of the country, play the role. We call the central bank play the role, the bank's bank, right? They will provide the service for the commercial banks. Okay, if we want to borrow money or make a loan, or save money, we will find the commercial banks. But we can deposit our money on the central bank, right? But for commercial banks, they can deposit their money on their bank. The bank's bank we call central banks. Okay, so the central bank have many functions. Main functions of the central bank. They want to maybe supply the money, supply the currency. In this country, they have to control the interest rate. They have to control the exchange rate, or maintain the inflation rate. Okay, so they have many missions. Okay, in this country. So for the forex markets, the central banks will conduct the official international reserve transactions in the forex market. For what? They want to control exchange rate. Many countries, they will adopt the management floating exchange rate or fixed exchange rate. That means they have to conduct the foreign currency transactions to management exchange rate or fixed exchange rate, right? That's why the central banks is also very important main participants in the forex markets.